leaving Sloan. The date is September 13th, 2011. I'm with Mr. Jack Reynolds at his address on 9315 Leaside Drive in Dallas, Texas. This is an interview for the Texas Holocaust and Genocide Commission's Liberators project. Mr. Reynolds, thank you for sitting down with me today to do this interview.
Well, thank you for coming. You've come a long way, and
well, it's worth it. I'm excited to hear what you have to share with us, because I know your story is a fascinating.
I don't know about that, but I hope my voice will carry up.
Yeah, we'll get your voice.
It's kind of messed up from this problem, you know.
Yes, sir. Well, I'd like to start, if we can go back. I'd like to know a little bit about your early childhood. If you could tell me a little bit about your childhood and your family and your life there in South Dakota.
Okay, well, I was raised in Canton, South Dakota, born in 1924, and grew up there and lived there until I was 14 in 1938. And my father and grandfather were in the filling station and garage business, but my father went on the road for the same company whose products they handled.
I see.
And he traveled parts of 3 states, all of South Dakota, all of North Dakota, and part of Minnesota. So he got home about every other weekend. I usually had a job of some kind when I was growing up. I delivered the Saturday Evening Post and the Country Gentleman and Ladies Home Journal. And the Saturday Evening Post was 5 cents a copy, and that's how I got my spending money.
Now, were you able to keep that money for yourself, or did that go to the family?
I kept it for myself.
Yeah.
All cent and a half out of the 5 cents.
Well, we had talked earlier.
Some people weren't that fortunate.
Yeah, I know. Well, we had talked about. That's a good point to talk about. The Depression was going on.
Yeah.
If you can talk a little bit, I know you were young early on in the Depression, but what are your memories of that?
Well, I mean, we didn't call it depression. We called it hard times, and it was pretty much that. My father and grandfather gave credit to their customers, and of course it finally broke them, but the small merchants like that did a tremendous amount to keep the country afloat. And they ran a tank wagon, they called it, out into the country to deliver tractor fuel to various farmers. They were switching over from horse farming to tractor farming, and so a lot of them, they built up some big credit bills, and they always figured when they got money they'd pay it, but it didn't always work out that way, I guess. But it was just the way things were. We just didn't have a whole lot of money, but we were probably better off than most of the other people.
Yeah. But when you got a little money in your pocket, what would you do with it?
I'd go down and get an ice cream soda. That cost 25 cents, and that was about what I made in a week.
Yeah, well, it's good spending for a week's pay. So did your older brother probably worked as well?
Oh yes, yeah. Yes he did, and And then when we got teenage, we both worked on farms, but I was in Iowa by that time, yeah, we both had to, do whatever we could do to make a little money for ourselves.
Well, you mentioned earlier when we were talking that 1938 was the hardest of the hard years. Can you talk a little bit about that?
My parents did not share their business with us. When they told us we were moving, we moved. And my whatever their conversations were, they had it to themselves. But I remember my dad built a trailer in our garage, in the business garage there, and we towed that to Texas with our necessary things, and then we lived in an apartment that my aunt had, rented that from her, and went to school there in Bryan for 2 years. And I played football 1 year and then tried to, and then delivered papers.
Do you remember when you heard that you were moving, how you felt about it?
Oh, I guess it was all right with me. I'd been in Bryan a few times when I was little, about 2 and 5 and like that. But it was all right. We towed that trailer down to Bryan, and Dad came down for the holidays and that sort of thing.
So how long did he stay up and continue to work?
My dad?
Yeah.
Well, he never did at that time move to Texas. We stayed in Texas for that 2 years, and by the end of that, he had relocated to Iowa and kind of started over again. And he was initially, of course, in South Dakota. He was selling refinery products. Mm-hmm. And he had some other lines as well, machinery. And so he was selling machinery to filling stations and garages in Iowa. Mm-hmm. The only thing was they weren't making any. They had switched over to wartime footing, you see.
Yes.
So he'd sell anything he could find, and couldn't find anything to sell. And at the end of, and my brother, of course, meantime was at A&M, in and out of A&M. He had his own system going. He'd work a semester and go to school a semester, And so when I graduated, I was offered a job in a shoe store that I'd been working in as assistant manager for, I think, $25 a week. My brother wrote and said, come on down to the shipyard. And I told the folks that's where I was going, and Dad said, well, wait a week and I'll take you down there. So we ended up, all three of us, working in the shipyard. Mm-hmm. My brother in the engineering office, and my dad and I were chippers. And what that is you gotta high frequency air hammer about this long with cold chisels in it, and you cut steel with it. All the fitting up welds that they had to make, then you had to clean those off. And sometimes they'd have us bevel plates so where they could weld them together and that sort of thing. And that was very, very hard work. And paid very well.
Yeah, do you remember how much you were making?
Yes. When they finally started hiring, they had some kind of labor problems to begin with, and they gave a test, and I had been going to what was known as a shipbuilding school, just learning how to use the chipping tools and everything, and building up my strength a little bit. And they gave us a test, and my dad, they hired him as first class, and they hired me as third class. And that was 78 cents an hour. And then after I'd been there a while, they promoted me to second class, and that was 87 cents an hour. And then after, I think, 3 months, I made first class, and that was $1.25 an hour. And that was truly big money in those days.
Yeah.
And you earned every penny of it, of course.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about what the work was like?
Well, you're using a cold chisel on steel, and there's a lot of that to be done around welding and everything, These were some of the first welded ships that were made. And so you had to hold that thing where it couldn't bounce like a jackhammer, If it bounced, you weren't cutting. And so you were using your muscles very, very much all the time. And there's a lot of heat from the sun on that steel and everything. And
so that they're working around the clock. You're working 8 hours, 8-hour shifts around.
8-hour shifts. And after we'd been there about 3 months, I guess, they started asking us to work overtime. And we never turned them down. So we ended up, and they paid time and a half after 40 hours, not after 8 hours, but after 40 hours. And then time and a half if you work Saturday, and double time if you work Sunday. And so they started asking us to work overtime, And so we were working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, 5 days a week, and 8 hours a day, two days a week.
Yeah, and you were telling me you had to go out early because of all the traffic on the...
Oh yeah. Traffic was really bad. We had to start 2 hours early to get there on time and everything. You didn't want to clock in late because they dock you a whole bunch.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I didn't ask about, so you worked there for 6 months, and that was in 40 or
42.
42, yeah. One thing I didn't ask you about was Pearl Harbor. I know you remember.
Well, I was a senior in high school in Council Bluffs when that happened, and I remember the radio, told us about it and everything.
Do you remember what you felt or thought?
Well, it made me mad. Incidentally, prior to that, And that fall, we'd gone across the river to Omaha to watch a parade of the 7th Cavalry from Fort Meade, South Dakota. It was their last horse-drawn or mounted parade, and of course they also had all this motorized equipment as well. But that stuck with me pretty good.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
That was Custer's outfit, of course.
Yeah. Well, so after your stint in Houston, you went back to Bryan College Station, right?
Yeah, I went and started
and you enrolled
A&M.
in A&M.
Yeah, enrolled in A&M.
And what course of study did you do at A&M?
Civil engineering.
So why did you have an interest in that?
Couldn't think of anything else. It's just about almost literally true. I couldn't think of anything I wanted to do. My brother was taking civil engineering, and I thought I'd try that. And the main problem was I didn't know what an engineer did. I was a long time figuring that out.
You thought they drove the train, right?
Well, yeah, but some people think that he's the one that pulls the little cord that goes toot toot, but actually the fireman did that, wasn't the engineer.
Yeah, that's right. So what do you remember from that time at A&M, that year at A&M?
It wasn't a year. It was.
Yeah.
Well, I remember I couldn't get enough to eat. They fed just exceedingly well there, but just I was wound up pretty tight, I guess, at the time. And I was putting everything I had into it, and that was something. And I had 2 roommates, and one of them on Saturday morning. I think we had a PE class on Saturday morning. Had to go out and run cross country. And so then he and I, this one roommate and I, would go around this cross country, and then they were about a mile in from the dormitory, and we'd run back to the dormitory and take a shower and start hitchhiking out for the weekend. You know, we'd have a date someplace. That was our main mode of locomotion, was hitchhiking. We called it highwaying.
Now that makes it sound more sophisticated.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it had a lot of informal rules and regulations, you know, because if you didn't, there would have been a chaos, you know.
Well, you've got to share these. What are they? Do you remember any of the informal rules and regulations?
Well, yeah, you took your turn. You know, you put a bag down or something like that. You're placed in line. If somebody stopped to offer you a ride, nobody mobbed him. Only one person to go up to the car and ask him where he's going. And if he had the option of taking it or passing it on to somebody else in line. And that was one of the main things. And most of the main cities in Texas had an Aggie corner. And that's where you go to catch your ride. Mm-hmm. And it was a no-no to go upstream of that point, but downstream was okay.
There's an etiquette involved.
There was.
Yeah.
There was. Which incidentally, when I got discharged from the Army, I hitchhiked all the way home from California. 3 rides. I think it was. 3 or 4.
As we think about your time at A&M, so you left A&M, you were there for how long that first time?
Probably half a semester.
Half a semester. And then you left there.
I still call myself a member of that class. But
oh, do you? So you left there to go where?
Fort Sam, Houston.
Yeah.
And from there I was sent to Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. In Camp Claiborne, I became a member of the 398th Engineer Regiment General Service, which was just being formed. And everybody in it, except a very small cadre of non-coms, was rookies, including officers. And that was kind of interesting, since I had a little bit of ROTC, both high school and A&M and Boy Scouts. They made me a corporal. I knew I would set up a pup tent. Be surprised.
That was going to be real useful.
Yeah, when nobody else knows how.
So, well, tell me what Fort Sam was like when you got there.
Don't have a whole lot of memories of Fort
Okay.
Sam. It's a beautiful place, being a permanent post.
Well, did you do your basic?
No,
There? No.
that was just induction.
Okay, it was just induction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My basic was at Camp Claiborne.
Okay.
And halfway through that, they sent us to Arkansas to work on a flood. We learned to build all kinds of stuff. Bridges and stuff like that. Gin poles and shear legs and tripods and all kinds of stuff for moving equipment. But up in Arkansas, we were working on a flood of the White River. And so we learned how to mattress slopes and, to control seepage, and to build chimneys around sand boils so they wouldn't wash the levee out. Rebuilt a few bridges. And then went back to Claiborne and finished up. And just before they finished up, they came and asked me if I wanted to go to the ASTP. And I said, well, what's that? And they said, we don't know, but there's an Army Specialized Training Program. And nobody knew what it was. So anyway, they sent me back to college. And I went first to LSU, which they called a STAR unit, which was some kind of an acronym, I think, but it was just for casuals. And then they sent me up to Lake Forest College it's 30 miles north of Chicago on Lake Michigan. And
so what was your training there? What were you taking coursework on?
well, it was kind of like a pre-engineering, but it wasn't as much as I'd had at A&M. I had some liberal arts stuff in there too, geography and all. But anyway, that started, I think, in September of '43, somewhere along in there. And along about in March of '44, well, they broke us up and sent us out to California desert. And that's where we joined the 104th Infantry Division. And at that time, an infantry division has about 15,000 men in it. And they brought in 5,000 replacements from the ASTP into the 104th.
Wow.
They were coming off of desert maneuvers at the time. And then they took us from there up to Camp Carson, Colorado. And we trained up there under General Terry Allen. And we specialized in night fighting. And then from there they sent us overseas.
I know this was unusual to have such a focus on night fighting. Can you talk a little bit about what that training was like? And
one of the main things was on the attack. That's the only place that made any difference, I suppose. And on the attack, while they would go in, instead of being all spread out 5 yards apart, so that one bomb or grenade or shell didn't catch a whole bunch of you, we went in column of twos with for front and flank patrols out to where we didn't hopefully run into any big surprises and all. And that way they were able to keep control and not lose people. Get lost in the dark.
mm-hmm.
And could sometimes get within 100 or 200 yards of the enemy before you had to spread out and go in as skirmishers, you see. So that was probably the kind of the crux of it right there. But you had to get used to the dark and that sort of thing. And they put on a school there, a division scout school. They called us the Wolf Scouts. And they brought in, I was in the defense platoon of Division Headquarters Company. And that's just basically 3 squads of anti-tank squads, for this school, they brought in 2 men from each line company, which made quite a group,
Yeah.
But from my platoon, we had 18 guys in it. And we learned all kinds of night patrolling and how to find your way with a compass and all that kind of stuff. A whole bunch of stuff you learn that way,
Well, did you have a sense? We haven't talked about how much you knew of what was going on with the war, but you're not training in the desert anymore, so you
No.
probably had to have an idea that.
So desert fighting was all over
Yes.
with
Yeah.
by that time.
Yeah. So you knew at some point you were probably going to Europe.
That was probably a pretty good guess.
Yeah.
Right? didn't look like jungle training, you know.
Well, the engineering, you picked civil engineering on a whim, or just because you didn't know what else to do. Did you enjoy that sort of work?
It was most rewarding to me. I didn't get rich or anything, but I had a very satisfying career in engineering.
Well, I was commenting earlier on your woodcraft is a hobby of yours as well, and it kind of speaks to that, you know, creating and designing and building.
Well, it's very helpful in a way because I was very good at drafting, and so I was able to, you know, design and plan my own projects.
So when did you get an idea of where you were going next, where you're going to be deployed?
Well, they sent us to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, and see, I was there during my 20th birthday, and I had an uncle in New York who was manager of Saks Fifth Avenue, and I finally was able to get in touch with him and went out to his home and met him for the first time in my life, you know. But you know, see, the invasion had already taken place, so, you know, there's not much doubt, I suppose, where we were going, I guess. And we were the first ones to go from the United States directly to France. We landed at Cherbourg, and about 90 or 91 days after D-Day. And it had taken that long to clear the peninsula and the port of Germans and obstacles, I guess. So we were, you know, they anchored out and brought us in on lighters. But some of them came, we went on a regular troop ship, you know, I guess it had been a luxury liner at one time, the George Washington. Some of them went over on Liberty ships, which is what I'd built in Houston, and landed at Utah Beach and waded ashore, you know, not under fire.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's how they
got their feet wet anyway.
Well, do you remember, can you talk a little bit about the mood on the ship going over?
Oh, I think everybody was in a pretty good mood. They did a little zigzagging, but, you know, I think the U-boat threat was mostly taken care of by that time, you know. And there's always some guys playing cards or running a shell game, something like that, you know. But the last, I do remember though that they handed out some little bitty books that were stapled together, little booklet deals, and some guy was teaching us a few words of French, you know, how to pronounce it, and, you know, where's the railroad station and all that kind of stuff. It was in this little book, and so we kind of went in for that, you know. But then that little book, which I have since lost, when we got over there, when we finally got to where there were some people to try to talk to, it was in Belgium, and it was in a Flemish part of Belgium, so the French equivalents didn't do much good. We were writing down I was writing down a little Flemish equivalents, you know, and we didn't stay in Belgium very long. Got over into Holland, so I was writing little Dutch equivalents in there, writing very small, of course.
Uh-huh.
And then I got into Germany, and for a long time there wasn't anybody to talk to, but when we did find somebody, well, we were writing German equivalents down. So all of my lexicon of German and French and Flemish and Dutch is lost.
So, had you ever been overseas before?
No.
No, you've never been overseas. So, what was that like for the first time to be in Europe?
Well, it was damp. It was cold and damp, and that was just in September and October, you know.
Yeah.
But in the Cotentin Peninsula, you know, that's where I'm really speaking of. Other places weren't that much different in climate, you know. But it was interesting. And in one of the places where we were in Belgium, it was on the grounds of the Peter Paul Rubens home, the Flemish painter. And of course that was where our headquarters was. We were in the huts that the Germans had left behind on the grounds, you know. And we had been, the reason we were in there, in Belgium and Holland, was they'd attached us to the Canadian First Army. And so anyway, we were there for a while and did all this stuff with the language thing, trying to get our clothes washed and everything, and finally got that done. And the platoon leader came by and said, we're not supposed to go to Brussels. It's been reserved for the British. So you're not supposed to go there, it's off limits. And the trade station is right over there. So we immediately went off limits and had an evening in Brussels. I remember, I think they gave us a couple of dollars or something, very, very little bit of money. Anyway, you know, it didn't normally pay, you know, but they gave us a little money. But here, of course, we're making combat pay by now. But we decided we wanted something to eat, and we saw a sign on this door for a restaurant. We went in, went up the stairs, went down the hall, into the hall. Man comes to the door. He's dressed up in white tie and tails. And all these ladies and gentlemen were in there dining, you know. He told us he didn't think we'd be comfortable in there. And I'm sure we couldn't have afforded a cup of coffee. But then we got into Holland, and I watched some shoemakers making wooden shoes, and that was fascinating. They could just, the skill in all of those guys, they were really something. And they had, where we were, we'd replaced a British infantry division, and there was a British armored division on one side of us and a Polish armored division on the other side of us. And at about that time, they issued the one and only time they ever gave us a liquor ration. They gave us a bottle of some kind of hooch, and for our squad. And the squad leader's name was Bruno Danish. He was a big Polish boy from Chicago. And some Polish guys went by in one of these Bren carriers, it's a fully tracked vehicle about the size of a Jeep. And they stopped, and he talked to him, and he came back, and he had a kind of a strange look on his face, and he was asking us if we would donate our share of the liquor ration to him so he could entertain his Polish friend. We said sure. And so they went over there, and the three of them down this leader of whatever it was. And he came back and he said, you know, I asked him, I guess you guys will be going back to Poland pretty soon. And they said, yeah, we think we will, but we don't know what kind of a Poland. To me, that made no sense at that time, but made all kinds of sense.
You talked about encountering like a Flemish group in Belgium, and once you had a chance to kind of interact with some of the Europeans, how were you? Can you talk a little bit about how you were received, or kind of your interaction with citizens there?
They were friendly. When we convoyed through France from Normandy to Belgium, which the convoys go for miles and miles and miles, you know, and they stretch through village after farm after village after farm, you know. And they stopped every 2 hours where they needed her or not, you know. And everybody get out and do their business. And it didn't seem to bother the local ladies. They came out and brought us a loaf of bread, you know, and stuff like that. And I remember when we were stopped like that one time, I see this well-dressed gentleman, overcoat, I don't know, hamburger bowler or something, some kind of hat on, tie, all dressed up. Came walking by, and I guess he had the same urge as we had, so he just pulled up to a garden gate there and did his business too.
So you're just acting like the locals. Right.
Just about.
Yeah.
Some young lady drove by on a bicycle. It was a little bit much for her.
All right. So so your group pushed. You pretty much, that area was secure getting to Belgium. When did you meet some resistance?
In from part of Belgium and into Holland. And see, being in the defense platoon of headquarters company, I wasn't on the front lines, you understand that. But they fought their way into Holland. And the first night in Holland, we were out in the country, and you're asking how they received us. This farmer, I noticed some guys lined up at this barn. It was not a high barn like ours. But it was high enough, I guess. And each man that went by, he'd pitchfork he'd give him a pitchfork full of hay, and he'd move on. So we each got a pitchfork full of hay. And I took that out in the pasture where I was to spend the night, and I dug a trench long enough to lay down in and lined the bottom of it and put some willow sticks in there and lined the sides and put my shelter half over the top of it. Cold blowing night, and I was just comfortable as in my own bed,
So
But he was
helping you.
he was being, he put that up for his cows to eat.
Well, your group, the combat engineer group, what sort of work were y'all doing at that time? What were y'all focused on during that time?
I was not a combat engineer group.
Okay.
I was in the defense platoon
I'm sorry, defense platoon.
of the Division
Yeah,
Headquarters Company.
yeah.
And what that is well, it had 3 squads of about 10 men each,
Mm-hmm.
and where armament is an anti-tank. We have a 57 millimeter gun and a 50 caliber machine gun, a bazooka, and we all have rifles and like that. And our job was securing headquarters so they didn't get blown away. And very good job as long as you're winning.
That's right.
And I forget what your question was.
Well, I was just asked what y'all. I was asking more kind of what y'all were doing when you began to meet resistance. I guess you're just bearing down and preparing for any sort of.
Well,
Yeah.
they attacked them
Yeah.
and drove them back.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was, wading through icy water and everything like that, really, really bad stuff. But we were there in Holland, I think about 3 weeks, and then they brought us back into the American Army, and we moved 165 miles and relieved the 1st Division at Aachen, and were able to have people in contact with the enemy continuously,
Mm-hmm.
both in Holland and in Germany. So when we got through at the end of the war, we had 195 consecutive days in contact with the enemy. But all right, from Aachen on, that was that had been a hard siege, and then the rest of that was, well, you know, the Siegfried Line and all that kind of stuff. And went on into your town of Brand, and then into Eschweiler, and then into Weissweiler. And Weissweiler, we spent a lot of time there, all during the bows. And in Eschweiler, my buddy and I, one of them, decided we needed to go out and fire some of our armaments, you know, that we hadn't had a chance to in the States and everything. So we had a little time for ourselves. We went off by ourselves, took several things with us. We had an ammunition ration that was given to us, you see, that just filled up the bed of the truck. And we had bazooka, and we picked up a German machine gun and Panzerfaust and various things like that. Went off and fired them. We wouldn't bother anybody. Our gun was set up in the driveway of a filling station, looking down toward the front. And so we got over there and we fired all of this stuff, the Panzerfaust, we fired the bazooka, we fired the German machine gun, which is twice as fast as cyclic rate as ours isn't there, you know. And then the last thing we did was had a grenade. It was in a heavy drawn steel case. We didn't know what it was. We'd never seen it before. It said grenade smoke WP on it. Everything backwards, you know, in Army there. Grenade smoke WP. And well, everybody said, well, it's a smoke grenade. Well, I don't know about that. Anyway, he pulled the pin, dropped it, and we started off. I said, let's get out of here. We began running, and by that time, thing went off, and there's a big shower of white phosphorus. We ran out from under it. Didn't have any good sense, you know. We got back to the filling station where the gun was set up, and the guy that was on guard with the gun, and the rest of them had gone someplace to a movie or something. And he had a great mind too. He had, you know, run on the same track. He took this grenade smoke WP around the side of the filling station, opened the door of the ladies' room, dropped it into John, and pulled the pin, you know, and dropped it in there. Closed the door. Afterthought, he stepped aside. About that time, the door went past him.
Man. These are boys with big toys.
Boys with big toys.
Well,
we weren't always that crazy, but there were exceptions.
Well, you mentioned the bulge, and I know that was a particularly hard time.
Well, for us, it was a boring time.
Yeah.
We were to the just to the north of it, you know, just a little bit to the north of it. We could hear and see the noise and the flashes and everything else, but they weren't shooting at us. But we had been at Weissweiler. This was just on a mile or so from Eschweiler. And I don't know why they moved only a mile, but they moved. And we'd been there a while. And got a 3-day pass to Verviers, Belgium. And so we rode the truck back to Verviers. Got there, they took our rifles, and the ordnance was supposed to clean them or something, you know. Checked them, I suppose, clean them. We got a shower, first one. We got clean clothes, first time we had any clean clothes. And we go out to enjoy the town. This was at a Belgian barracks called a Kaserne. And our MP at the gate says, 104th, go back. And so we went back and waited until midnight. They said, well, load your rifles. And got in the truck, went back to the Weissweiler. That was our 3-day pass.
Mm-hmm.
That was the night. That was the day the bullets started. And they didn't know what anybody was. They thought we might run into something on the way back. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't know. But before that happened, we had a fire in a house that one of the squads was occupying, and no, it was after that, after I got back.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in the attic. They used straw up there for insulation. And some of them had set it afire somehow with a stovepipe, I think. And we put it out, must have had 100 guys out there with helmets, passing water from, a bomb hole or shell hole up to put out this fire. And we got through and finally got it out. And there went my shower, But the company commander, I guess that was one of the nicest things he ever said to me. He said, if I get another chance, I'll send you back to another 3-day pass and you get another shower. So, after the balls got quieted down, we crossed the Roar River and we made our way all the way to Cologne. And I think we were one of about 3 divisions that took Cologne. There was us and the 3rd Armored Division and I think one other infantry division that took Cologne. Mm-hmm. And we were there, and the same buddy and I went down to see the cathedral. We find our way to get down there, a lot of it blocked with rubble and everything. And while we were there, we looked at the cathedral, and the crowd lobbed a shell in on us from across the river, and it didn't hurt us, but it got a guy, injured him a little bit. I don't know how bad. that we'd been talking to from the Air Force, you know. But anyway, I've been, you know, several weeks past since I'm talking about it. The company commander gave me a 3-day pass to Liberators again. And so I went to Liberators and had a nice 3-day pass this time. Came back, but didn't come back to Cologne. We got there, we went up the river and through Bonn, and then there was a pontoon bridge across the Rhine River. We went across on that, and when we did, when we were in the Remagen bridgehead, you see. And so when it's kind of interesting that kind of key moments. You know, the one was the boat started, and the other one was when we got into the bridgehead. You know, and while we were in this town of Holocaust, which is where we were at the time, some teenager came by when I was on guard on the gun, and he's acting kind of strange, so I called him over, and he's carrying this Luger, which is sitting right over there, and so I got that from him, and I don't know, gave him a chocolate bar or something, and that's kind of a prime souvenir, you know.
Well, I know after, so there's quite a bit of momentum after when y'all started moving again.
Oh yeah, we're just blowing and going, you know, 20, 30 miles a day sometimes. And one of our regiments with the 3rd Armored Division made the Ruhr encirclement, and the rest of them are coming along behind and balling them up and everything like that, you know. And after that, then they started to push all the way across the country, and it went real fast. And made a number of stops along the way, you know, it was a long distance and everything. And but just one day we made our squad usually operated by itself. One squad would move up and secure with our platoon leader, you know, and we'd secure a site for our division headquarters, and the others would stay back guarding and move up with the rest of them, and that sort of thing. And he took us a little ways into the Harz Mountains, and decided we were in the wrong place, turned around and went back. But his language problems, he was trying to ask people where the German army was, and they said, well, you know, pointed like that. He took it that there was a house a few hundred yards down the road there. So he ordered us to put a shot through it. We did. The old man came running down, you know, no soldat, no soldat.
One thing that you mentioned earlier that I wanted to go back and ask about, the Allies. You're connected to this Canadian. What was the opinion of the Canadians, and what was the interaction like with that Canadian group?
Being in the Canadian Army, but I was a British Corps, and so all we saw was, no, we did see, we saw some Canadians, we saw some British, we saw some Polish. Well, they had a little different outlook than we did, you know. We're in the middle of a conversation. They say, oh, tea time, cheerio. And, well, go off and you know, light a fire and heat up their water for tea. And when this went on the little town there, where I saw the wooden shoemakers. There's, I don't know, all I know was there were two main streets that are intersected in a T. And then the stem of the T went over a dike, and I didn't get any farther in than that. And we were in that intersection, and there was a park there. And beyond that was a school. Well, the park was occupied by a battalion of British tanks. And then we had MPs on the corner, both British and American. Americans stayed there 24 hours a day. British at midnight, they left. Anybody out after midnight on the John want to know where they're going. That's the way they looked at it. And they had two guards marching around that park all the time. Just, or we'd stay in the shadow, and if you come by us while we'd wait till you got by and challenge you to your back. But these guys were walking guard, and they had hobnails on their shoes, their boots, and then in their heels was a horseshoe set into the heel. Boy, they made a lot of racket, you know, walking around there. And the Canadians, they were talking about the British rations. They said they were terrible they were. They said, you guys would quit. But I guess we got along pretty good with him. I saw Montgomery one time. He came to our headquarters. Saw him at a distance.
Did you have a much of a sense of kind of the mood of the headquarters and what was going on, kind of activity with it?
No. It was just like, you know, we knew all about map reading, and I never saw a map, except in Stars and Stripes, you know, about that size. We didn't know what was going on. Like, whatever, you know, if you're right in the headquarters.
I know General Allen stayed with the 104th, right? Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Yeah. And he was the only one, I think, in World War II that commanded two different divisions. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
He commanded the 1st Division in Africa and Sicily. And he got crosswise with some of the higher generals, and they sent him, they relieved him without prejudice. But he went back and they gave him another division, which was us. And he was a very beloved general, especially afterward, where, you know, came to all our reunions till he died and everything, you know. But but we felt like we had we always got there first and had the lowest casualties due in some part, you know, to our training in night fighting and also just aggressive spirit, I guess.
Did morale stay pretty high, pretty good?
Yeah. Yeah. You could see those guys, you know, after they'd been fighting for a long time, knowing they got the 1,000-yard stare, you know, just exhausted, that sort of thing. But after this little foray into the Harz Mountains, I think we were lost. Wouldn't have been unusual with that particular officer. We went to a town called Duderstadt and spent the night. And in Duderstadt, we met a couple of guys. One of them was from the 106th Infantry Division, which had been wiped out practically in the Bulge. And so he had been a prisoner, they marched him to the east, and then they marched him back to the west, you know. They get too close to the front on either side, and then they started him back east again. And this guy told him he was sick. And they didn't shoot him, they left him behind. So he was there when we got there. Another little guy who was a Jewish guy, I think. He wasn't an army, wasn't a soldier. And this soldier hadn't had anything to eat. And I went in the bakery and they had one loaf of bread and I made them give it to me. I thought since of it, I should have given it half back to him, but I didn't. We had plenty of food, but it wasn't, the kitchen hadn't gotten there, you know. So I wanted to feed the guy a little bit. He was starving. And so anyway, this Jewish guy said, well, I can tell you where we can get eggs. So the next morning before dawn, we started out and we went out in the country a few miles. And he went up and I stayed with the vehicle, and he went up and rapped on the window, woke the people up, came back with 100 eggs. And so we took them back to town and we're feeding this guy that was starving, you know. And he would say, well, I'm going to be sick. I'm going to be sick. You go ahead and eat it anyway. And then the following day was when we reached Nordhausen.
Okay. Well, what did you know of the camps, and I mean, how much awareness had you had of the camps before we get to that?
Zero. Never heard of it. We pulled into Nordhausen in the afternoon. We found these apartment buildings. They were quite nice. Fairly large buildings, and there were several of them. They were spaced maybe 100 feet apart, something like that. Out behind them, they had little gardens, a little strip of garden for each apartment. And most of them would have a rabbit hutch. They raise their rabbits for meat, and we kicked occupants out of an apartment for our squad, and we went in there. And after we'd been in there a while, one of the guys came up and he had a funny look on his face and says, "Come with me," and we all went over next door. We got next door, and there was this stink coming out of there, a big stench. And we went in there, and our medics were in there, and they had all of these people that were nearly dead. And they were, feeding them a little teaspoon at a time of hot chocolate or something, But if they fed them very much, they'd get sick and die. Get sicker and die, They were just barely alive. And the smell was the smell of death. And so they told us where it came from. We all got in our truck and we went out there to the camp. On the way we saw, an older man, made him get on the truck with us and go out there. We didn't bring anything back. And we got out there, and I know I didn't see all of it. What I saw was all of these dead people laid outdoors there on the ground, and it looked like acres of them. And they were, had been living in there, and there was others in there that they hadn't brought out, and all, and just a terrible scene. And what we didn't see at all was the underground factories that they had. See, that was back under the Hartz Mountains that I told you about. They had these underground tunnels back under the Hartz Mountains, and these were slave laborers that were working on the buzz bombs. And
V2 rockets.
The V1s,
Yeah.
and I think also the V2s. We saw a lot of V1s go by. And you had a distinctive noise to their engine, and then you'd hear the engine cut off, and it was going into a dive and everything. There's pictures there of
Let's see, yeah, at Nordhausen.
Nordhausen. I've heard since that they call it Dora Middleburg or something like that.
Dora Middlebow, yeah.
Dora Middlebow. But we just knew it as Nordhausen. And
So what did you do once you got into the camp? that they were working to get.
We didn't do anything.
Yeah, they were trying to get the
ones that
yeah.
that could be had a chance of saving, our medics were working with on them, and they did this tremendous labor to try and save those people and all. But,
it's hard for people now to understand what it was you saw, and that this sort of horror and death that you saw. I mean,
well, it still bothers me. We went back to our apartment, and the guys in my squad were as fine a young men as they come, were just, well, nobody was saying a word. It just almost like they'd forgotten how to talk or something, you know what I mean? It just affected them so much. And the occupant of the apartment came and wanted to get something out of the refrigerator, I don't know, milk for a baby or something, which you can't imagine anybody saying no. The guy that met him at the door said no, sent him off. Just just kind of beyond words. We'd seen a lot of dead, but nothing like that.
Yeah, there was nothing that really prepared you for
nothing.
You said now you still think of it. Is there a time where, is there something that kind of causes you to think of it? Or like now when you think about it, you had said it still bothers you.
Well, it didn't haunt me or anything
Sure.
like that, but when it comes up and start talking about it like this, well, they kind of. Would you like a cold Coke?
I think we're okay.
Water?
I'm glad you took a drink though. So I know your throat gets dry after a little while.
Well, she's got cancer in the esophagus, and it's producing mucus all the time. And it makes my voice gurgly and everything, and messes it up pretty good.
As we talk about this experience of you, did it change how you felt about the enemy that you were fighting in the war after you saw them?
I would say so. I mean, you can hardly imagine that kind of brutality, I'm trying to think of the name of it. There was a massacre of American troops in the Bulge, what they call it, I can't remember.
Normandy?
They went,
Malmedy?
Almeida massacre, yeah. But that made everybody mad. It really did.
So how long did y'all stay in Nordhausen? That
I think we moved the next day.
maybe the next day.
And we made several more stops, before we got to the end of the road. And where we ended up was a town called Delitzsch, and that was on the Mulde River, a tributary of the Elbe, and between the Mulde and the Elbe was supposed to be kind of no man's land or something, The Russians stopped at the Elbe and we stopped at the Mulde.
So you didn't have any interaction with the Russians?
Well, our recon troops had a patrol over there, and they made it all the way across, which going through territory held by Germans, and the Germans let them through, and they made contact with the Russians, crossed the river, and got good and drunk.
I've heard a lot of that happen.
Yeah. And then they invited the Russian division commander over to meet our general, and the defense platoon was constituted as an honor guard for this Russian general. And this was planned, some days in advance.
Mm-hmm.
And they took our helmets and took them and varnished them and put division insignia on the Timberwolf on the front of it, perfect target. And they gave each of our squads a flat iron and a can of shoe polish.
Did you get to take another shower?
No shower.
No shower.
Just
window dressing.
Well, I don't think the Russians could have smelled us anyway. But actually, I think we were probably showering in local facilities there. But we ironed our pants and ironed our jackets, ironed our shirts, and we ironed our shoes. The reason that's necessary is that their shoes were made with the rough side out. You couldn't polish them. So we shined them down with a flat iron and where they're a little bit slicker, and then polished them the best we could. And then we were the honor guard when the Russian general, but they flew him over in a spotter plane, I think, and brought him in a Jeep or command car or something. But our headquarters there at Dulwich was in a place called the Chocolate Factory. It was built in a square, you know, with a hollow inside and everything. We secured that. And we were there for at least one night, or maybe two, at least one night. We were there for 2 nights before the headquarters moved in. So our little 10-man squad had this whole big building, you know. And somebody had gone and gotten a German water can and filled with Everclear, medical alcohol. We had quite a party on that. We cut it with grapefruit juice.
This is while you were securing the FAM?
Yeah. Okay. We had somebody on guard doing it.
Yeah.
But we had a pretty good little party there.
So you were in Dulwich when you heard of the surrender?
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
We were in Dulwich for a good little while.
Yeah.
And you know, they stopped, and you know, festivities stopped and everything. But I can't really remember where I was when the VE came back. It must have been there.
Well, you remember? I'm sure you remember how you felt when you heard the news.
Not good. Yeah. They from Dulwich, we had passed through a city called Holly on the way to Dulwich. It's about 30 miles, I think, something like that. And it was a beautiful, beautiful town, and hadn't been beat up too bad. And they tried to get them to, you know, move out or surrender or something, you know, so we wouldn't have to tear the town down, you know. And it was mixed results, but I think they ended up having to tear about a third of it down to get the Germans out of there and all. But they saved all they could. They tried their very best. Which is pretty hard to do when you have other objectives in mind.
Well, I know you saw a lot of devastation once you got into Germany.
Oh yeah. A whole lot of it. And from Dulwich, they sent me back to Holly. There was an airfield there, German airfield. And they told me to go back there and pick up some men at the City Hall, the Burgomaster's office, take them out there and clean out some barracks. And so I did that. I got lunch from the cook, you know, and went over there and picked these guys up. And took them up there and got them busy, and they had a foreman, and they didn't need me, so I ratted around the town some, and everything. End of the day, I took them back to the city hall. Next day I did the same thing. That was Monday and Tuesday. And finished up several barracks there, big ones. Finished up them on Friday. And I don't know why, but I got on the telephone, and the regular telephone system was working. I got into division, into my company. I said, okay, I finished what I was doing now. They said, what? Didn't we give you, tell you not to do that? They'd called it off, and told everybody it was me, I guess. So I got about a week's sort of a vacation, And anyway, then later on, though, we went ahead and moved over there, so all the cleaning I did was useful.
Mm-hmm. So how long did you stay in Germany? I mean, the war's over.
Oh, war's over?
Yeah.
Not very long.
Yeah.
I've got this division history here. We were there a few weeks, but being one of the later ones to get over there, we were one of the first ones to come back. Now, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? The idea was that they were going to have trainers for Japan. And so from Halle, we went in a motorcade to Leipzig. Leipzig, we got on trains, left all of our equipment, all of our trucks, heavy guns, everything. Rode these 40 and 8 trains. I've got pictures of them. 40 and 8 was back to World War I. Little bitty box cars with 4 wheels. And they got stenciled on the inside of them their capacity. Either 40 horses or 40 men or 8 horses. And they had 32 of us on there. 40 would have been standing room only. And we rode those for 4 days and 4 nights till we got to a place called Camp Lucky Strike. That was at Le Havre. And from Le Havre, we went back to New York and arrived, I think, about the 4th of July. Fireboats and dancing girls and everything. And then they gave us, from their furlough, I think we got 30 days actually at home. And then we went out to the West Coast, Camp San Luis Obispo, and we were trained to go into Japan in November. I'm going to stop and go see what Nell, if she needs me.
Okay, all right, sure. All right, so you're on your way back to the States, or did you know at that point, are y'all having a conversation about what's next? While the 4 nights or 4 days you're on the train?
Nah.
No. You're looking for more Everclear and the grapefruit.
No, we had our boxcar that we were in didn't have a good roof on it, And of course, it was always raining. And every time the train lurched by here, there was a sheet of water down through the joints in the roof, So after a night of that, saw a carload of potatoes, a big tarp over it. So when we left that time, the tarp was on our boxcar. A little more comfortable after that.
Kept you dry.
Yeah. And then the last 2 nights, I got up on top there and cut a hole in the tarp and crawled under it. So I had a place to lay down all the way, without having my feet on somebody and that sort of thing.
You're creative. Yeah. So you had reported back in August in California.
Mm-hmm.
So you were there training when you heard the news.
Yeah, training had not really started yet.
Okay.
But we were there in August.
Okay. Do you remember when you heard the news of the bomb being dropped?
Yes. And then the surrender.
Yeah. What was your? Do you remember what your thoughts were when you heard about the bombing of the first bomb?
Well, sounded good to us. Yeah. When the news of VJ came, well, that was big news.
Yes. Yeah, because for what you knew, as you said, you were preparing for an invasion of the Japanese mainland.
Yeah. At that time, didn't know when, but, they didn't tell us anything, but I found out since they had the date already set for us in November.
Mm-hmm. Well, so VJ Day happens. You're in California. I know there was celebration. What was the mood like? How'd y'all celebrate?
I don't remember particularly. I know everybody was all happy about it and everything.
You were anxious to get back to Texas.
Yeah, they soon started discharging. And they had a point system, and they gave you priority, and I got home in time for Christmas.
Well, we skipped that part. We talked about it before we started interviewing, but you'd gotten married. We didn't even talk about that part.
Well, I didn't get married till 1950.
Well, you had met this girl. I'm sorry, you'd met this. I thought y'all
I didn't
met.
meet her till 1950.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought you'd met her earlier.
No.
You met her in 1950.
Yeah.
That's right, and married soon after that, pretty quick after that.
Yeah, I graduated from A&M in January of 50. And I met her in April and married her in November.
So did you go back to A&M fall of 46, I guess?
Spring of 46.
Spring of 46. So there were a lot of GIs, I'm sure.
Yeah, most of them were GIs. Yeah. Yeah, I went through the spring semester and summer, both summer terms, and then I dropped out and worked in the fall semester, and I went back and finished in 4 years,
Well, I'd like to hear the story again for the record about how you met your wife. Your mother was involved. I remember you telling me that.
My mother had had been working in a children's store, and her mother had grandchildren. They came in to buy stuff, you know. They had her father had rented a house there in Bryan for the summer, and Ellen, her mother had come out and spent the time with him there. So mother came home, and I had lived at home while I was going to A&M. I missed quite a bit of the experience by doing that, but anyway, that was, and I'd got a job with a construction company on building a building on the campus when I got out of school. So I was still staying at home, and just gotten started there. Anyway, mother came home and said, met a woman who has a pretty daughter, and I want you to come meet her, and we can go call on her. I said, okay. So anyway, we went and called on them, and before long I was going down there after supper every night. They didn't eat late so I'd eat another supper down there. Her mother was an outstanding cook, and so is she.
Y'all were married not too long after that, I know.
Yeah, I think we courted for about 3 months, and then separated for about 3 months when I moved to Dallas to another construction job. Getting cramps. I came to Dallas with some friends one weekend, and other than that, we didn't see each other. But finally told my boss I want to get married. He said, well, that's fine. Well, I want some time off to get married. He said, well, you got the whole weekend. What are you talking about? And so that was how we decided to get married the day after Thanksgiving. And then I just didn't show up on Friday. But I showed up on Monday.
Short honeymoon.
Short honeymoon.
So you made your business in construction. That's what you made. You said you.
That's how I started out.
Okay.
But I stayed with the general contractor just 1 year, and then I went to work for consulting engineers, and the first one I worked for was called Cook and Fowler, and they had a city-county bond issue, road and bridge bond issue, and I eventually became their bridge design engineer, and when that about to wind up, well, then I went to work for a structural engineer named R.C. Stokes. Worked for him for about 2 years. And then I got a job with another consulting engineer that had several contract sections of I-35E. So I worked for them for 1 year. And that was, all of these were very formative and instructive for me and everything. And then at the end of this 1 year, they were, politics got into it to where they didn't hire my boss back for any further freeway work, because they had to get some other consulting engineers that they didn't want.
I see, yeah.
So we just won't do it at all. So that's when I went to work for Dallas Water Utilities, known as Dallas City Waterworks at that time. And I went to work for them in February of 1958. And that was right after the end of the biggest drought that had ever been in record in Dallas, Texas. Broke in the spring of '57, from '50 to '57.
What was Dallas's water situation at that point when you came on?
Well, they had dug their way out of it a bit, but it was still pretty dicey. But we were here all during that time of the drought, and their main water supply was Lake Dallas. And Lake Dallas was basically out of water, and they had to go up to the Red River and get all that salt-laden water out of it. And every other well that they could reactivate, they used every possible source of water during that time. And all that water from the Red River, where it killed all the azaleas and other salt-intolerant plants, and rusted out all the water pipes and all the hot water tanks. Boy, at the end of that period of time, Dallas, citizens of Dallas had the best water piping and the best water tanks you can imagine. They all had to be replaced.
That's right. So I guess that Ray Hubbard is a response to that, building Lake Ray Hubbard and having that as didn't Dallas develop that as a water source, I think, right after that?
Lake Louisville was under
Louisville.
construction
Okay.
at that time.
Okay.
And then and of course we got some water rights in Lake Grapevine, relatively small amount. And we got a little bit of water rights in Lake Lavon, and we got a major water right in Lake Tawakoni, and in Lake Ray Hubbard, the only one that we own and operate lock, stock, and barrel. But then since then, they've also gotten Lake Fork Reservoir, and they have a water right in Lake Palestine that has not been put to use yet. They also built another one above Lake Louisville, which is Lake Ray Roberts.
Well, now, how long were you with the Dallas Water?
Almost 32 years.
32 years. Long career. You saw a lot of changes.
Yeah. It was a really good job for me. Just in all of my jobs, I guess, was able to make use of most everything I learned, and was able to do anything I thought I was big enough to do, you know.
Mm-hmm. One thing I know we talked about earlier that you've done is you've gone to reunions or meetings of the 104. Can you talk a little bit about that?
In the first many years, I didn't go to any of them.
Okay.
Except they had one here in '68, I think they had in Dallas, and I went to part of that. But then the last number of years, I went to as many as I could.
Since your retirement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't, you know, in the early days, I didn't care much about it. But my attitude changed with time and all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what does it mean to you now to be able to go?
I don't see but maybe one or two that I had known in the service. But you meet a lot of people that you can, you know, if they're a timber wolf, you can talk to them and swap stories. And everybody went to the same places to some extent, but nobody had the same experience. And so it's really interesting and enjoyable in that way. And also it's a very patriotic and spiritual experience.
Well, what?
And
I'm sorry.
and you know, they'll always have a great speaker there and all that sort of thing. One thing I'll mention particularly, one of the little towns that we liberated in Holland, the mayor of that town came several times and to be our keynote speaker. They remember us and they appreciate us. And a couple of their towns renamed their main street, or maybe they owned the street, Timberwolfstrasse, you know. And they've had, which I've never been able to take part in, but they've had battlefield tours, you know, many of them, and let them go back there, you know.
Retrace the steps of the...
Yeah, and that was, time-wise, that was just a small interlude of our whole time over there. But those people are kind of special, and they don't forget, and they teach their children. Mm-hmm. And they have some reenactment groups that they have our uniforms, they have our equipment, you know, Jeeps, they have just about everything like that. And every, I think it's October, they have what they call their March to Remember. And some of them have little museums in their garages or something, you know.
It's got to be great to be able to share that with the guys that you were in the 104th with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really been a joy being able to go there and Nell has gone with me to two of them. One in New Orleans, which was real good, and one in Little Rock. Aside from that, she's been like this and unable to go or to stay by herself. And so her daughter Nancy would take a day off from her teaching job, stay with her, and her husband and the two grandsons would go with me. And so that in itself has been very rewarding. And the younger grandson, Paul, is a bagpiper. And so he's taking his pipes with him and played a tune for us at the reunion,
That's neat. Well, are there some things I should have asked you about that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
Well, I think you did a great job, really. Working by myself alone, I would just go chronologically and interminably. But this way we got through quite a bit of it.
Anything we missed we should have talked about?
Well, I've done a bit of hunting, and quite a bit of woodworking, and
what do you enjoy with woodwork? What do you primarily do?
Pretty wide variety. I did some of the things in this room, and then I've done things from a church. I've got a lot out of making stuff for the church, I made one cross that hangs over the altar. It's 10 foot high, Celtic cross. And I made this shelf and took a few carving lessons and made that.
Oh wow, that's beautiful.
And I made those out of some kind of whiskey boxes over there, when I first started out. A little bookcase there and those things there. These shelves.
Do you still do any woodwork?
Well, I still got my shop, and I haven't been doing any, but I'm not saying I quit either.
You haven't. I know you haven't. One thing that you mentioned there that I'd like to ask, again, just one more question, looking back on kind of that Nordhausen experience, and you're a person of faith, and you're a person whose faith is important to you, and just looking back on that experience, how have you thought about it? How have you processed it as you think about just what you saw?
Well, I wish I could give you something profound on that, but I can't. It's just a time when people were doing horrible things, and they're still doing horrible things.
Yeah, you saw the worst of what men can do to each other.
Pretty much. Pretty much. We saw other places in this town of Duderstadt that I mentioned to you. There were the whole barracks there of laborers, both men and women. They're all in the same barracks. And I don't think they were. I know they were working them, but I don't think they were abusing them so bad there, that I could tell. But with having freed them, now they were kind of getting into a riotous mood, and trying to storm the liquor store and stuff like that.
Mr. Reynolds, that you've been generous with your time today.
Well, you're the one who's been generous to come all this distance and everything, and I hope I haven't bored you to tears or anything.
Well, Robert DeBoard's here with us too, who's helping with an interview, and I know both of us would like to thank you for your service to our country and the things you did for us sitting here years later. So.
Well, you're more than welcome.